All right, guys, here we are again, another Leads to Deals podcast episode. As you know, sales is the greatest sport in the world, and my goal is to bring in the world-class athletes of the sales game. It takes the hungriest of the hungriest entrepreneurs to create mere millions from mere pennies. And I hope you have the same burning appetite and desire to consume all the tips and tricks that we're going to share. So again, welcome to another episode of Leads to Deals. We're going to talk about everything from leads to deals, and everything we talk about leads to deals. So if you find value in today's podcast, I want you to subscribe. I appreciate you guys liking and commenting as well. So I want to introduce our new guest. His name is Eric Brewer. His name is a brand itself. And so Eric Brewer, welcome to the Leads to Deals podcast, brother.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So I've got to know you through the real estate industry, Eric. You're somebody that I have a lot of respect for your sales prowess. Consuming your content is something that I thoroughly enjoy. Watching good people in the art of communication is like watching a painter paint. And so I've been consuming this content, and I watch the way that you deliver your words. And so I want to get started in how you got involved in sales. Like, what was your first real sales job, Eric?
Yeah, my first real sales job was in the car business. And it's funny every time I tell this story how quickly my perspective changed. Go back a step and I'll tell you like how I got into sales. And so I was a little bit of a knucklehead as a kid. School was not for me. I went to school for two things: girls and sports, and that was it. And so I really struggled in school. I was always like smart enough to do like no work and somehow pass. And I only cared about passing so that I can continue to play sports. So when high school was finally over, I was so relieved. I had no interest in going to college, and I partied for about 6 months after graduation until all of my friends either went off to college or got real jobs, and I was like, I don't want to do either of those things.
Yes.
And all of the jobs that were available to me with a high school diploma and no real skill set were bad jobs. They were like $7 an hour doing really, really hard construction. And I was working one of those jobs one day, and it was like July, and I was like knocking out a plaster ceiling in like an old crack house. Shit was just falling all over my face. I was sweating, and I heard the lunch bell, and I was like, oh, thank goodness. So we all would walk down, and we sat at this building, and there was like a little bit of shade, and we all had our lunch pails, and we would eat our lunch. And then Barry, the foreman, would come along when lunch was over, and he'd round everybody up. They'd all pack their lunch back in their pail. They'd walk single file back into the building and get back to work. And I remember I was walking in single file, and everybody would, like, if you can imagine this, in single file, turn into the building, and they would disappear. Old EB kept walking right to his car, and I got my car, and I drove home, and I never went back to work from lunch that day, and I was done. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I talked to my dad. My dad and his dad and his dad had all been lifetime military.
Yep.
And my dad convinced me to go into the Army. And it seemed reasonable. Like, I was lost, man. I had no idea what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And he's like, look, you're going to get disciplined. You're going to get 3 hot meals. You're going to have a place to stay. It'll teach you to be a man. And so I did. I joined the U.S. Army, went off to basic training. I did basic training at Fort Knox. I did my AIT at Fort Gordon in Georgia. My permanent duty station was in Fort Hood, Texas. And I got all of that stuff. I got a big dose of discipline day one. I built 30 pounds of muscle and became like a soldier in boot camp. I was strong. I was lean. I was fast. I was mean. And then I went off the permanent duty station. I got to travel a little bit. I learned a lot about just growing up and being on my own. And after I did my time, I came home, and my skill set in the military, which was avionics communications repair, which is a fancy word for fixing radios and helicopters, was not applicable back in central PA. So I came back to Pennsylvania and I was looking through the newspaper for jobs, and there was like this little job and it said lot porter, and it was at a Mercedes dealer. And I was like, that sounds like fun. So I dressed up, went to a job interview. I wore a suit a little like this, probably a little smaller in size and a little dated, but I wore a double breasted suit that I had from senior prom 5 years earlier to a $7 an hour interview. And if you've ever been to a like car dealership and you sit in the service department, it's like this boiler room of stress and anxiety and people's like, money just flying out the window for brakes and timing belts and all that stuff. And there I'm sitting just waiting for my interview, like not a care in the world. And the manager comes walking out and he's like, you can tell he's just super busy. He looks around and he like double takes at me. And I got this double breasted suit on. I stick out like a sore thumb in the middle of a waiting area. And he goes, Eric? And I stand up like to attention because I'm still in military mood. And I go, yes, sir. And he goes, you're hired.
I
And
love it.
I was like, all right. And we went back. He gave me the paperwork. I started a couple days later. And a lot porter, like, basically just organizes inventory around a car dealership. And I would show up 15 minutes early because that's what I learned in the military. And I would work 15 minutes late and I hustled. So after like 6 months, I got a promotion. After like 8 months of being there, I was walking across the lot and all of the salesmen were congregated out in this area they called the point, waiting for a lead to come in. And there was like this piece of trash blowing around that area. And I stopped and picked it up, put it in my pocket, and kept walking. Well, apparently the owner of the dealership was sitting in his office, and he saw that. And he noticed that there was 10 salespeople out there that watched this trash blow around for an hour. And here's this 21-year-old kid that comes walking by that makes $7 an hour that had enough awareness and enough pride to stop and pick it up. That day, I got promoted to a $65,000 a year job. And that was kind of my first sales job, but it wasn't called a sales job. I didn't see it as a sales job. And it was what they call an assistant service manager. So when you take your car into a dealership, particularly a new car franchise, they'll say, hey, Scott, looks like you got 30,000 miles on it. When was the last time you had the brakes look like? Of course, if you're like me, I was like, I don't know, man. The car stops when I press on it. I don't know. Well, you okay if we take a look at that? What's it? Yeah, please do. I'd like to have that safety thing checked out. And then you call and you go, hey, the brakes are this. It costs $400 to fix it. Looks like you haven't had your tires rotated in 7,000 miles. That's another $24.95. And so the mechanic would come to me and they'd go, this, and this needs done. And here's how long it takes. And I would go back and I'd calculate how much that costs. And I would just enthusiastically call people and tell them what needs done. Turns out I was selling like 3 times as much service business as everybody else. But I didn't know anything about cars. Still at this time, I'm 48 years old. I've never changed my oil. And and I don't know how to. I
Yeah.
don't. But I would
Yeah.
listen to what they'd say and I would just repeat it enthusiastically. And so I did that for about a year. I was making like 70 grand as a 22-year-old kid. I was
Which
like
is
the
big.
first guy in
You're
my group
talking
of
like
friends.
late 90s, early 2000s, right?
This is 97.
Yeah, that's big money
Big
for a
money.
lot of
I
people.
had no debt. I didn't have any
You a
kids.
baller.
I didn't have anything. I could do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I caught the eye of the sales manager, who to this day is one of my best friends. He's my number one business mentor. And he's like, hey, man, you should move into sales. And I was like, nah, no way, dude. Like, now you got to remember, like service and sales, ops and sales, fulfillment and sales in any organization, they're like, they're always at each other's throats, right? So this goes on for about 3, 4, 5 months where he's in my face recruiting. He's like, do you know how much you could make? And I was like, dude, I'm good. Like, I don't need it. So I'll remember I was out having a couple drinks with one of the salespeople, like happy hour on a Friday. And I was eating some chicken wings, drinking a Michelob, and he told me how much money he made the month before. Guy's name was Brian Busilla. Brian's a nice guy. Couldn't sell his way out of a paper bag. He made like 22 grand, and I was like, huh? Like, you made the company 20? He's like, no, I brought home 22 racks, Playboy. And I was like, I texted Craig, my mentor, and I was like, when can I start? Like literally 2 Michelob's in. I had a little beer muscles, I think. And so that's how I got into sales, right? He's like, dude, super excited for you. Can't wait. I had no training, nothing. So at that car dealership back then, it was a Mercedes Toyota used car franchise. If you hit 20 cars, you would make top salary for the next month, and you also would get 20% of gross profit, and you'd probably be salesman of the month out of the 15 to 16 salespeople. So I started on June 17th, no sales training. I still didn't know the difference between a carburetor and a spark plug. Between June 17th and June 30th, I sold 21 cars in 13 days. Now, I still didn't know how to sell. 2 weeks prior, I was scared to death of salespeople. Like they were just intimidating. They were pushy in my mind, right? So, and then that was it. And then 16 straight months, I was salesman of the month. For the first time ever in the company, I sold 35 cars. It had never been done before. I did it for 8 months straight. And then I got promoted to manager, general sales manager. Then eventually I was running multiple stores. So that's how I got into sales. I was scared to death. I had this perception of what salespeople were, and I didn't feel like that matched up with my, character or my personality. And little to find out, it was like sales wasn't what I thought it was. I thought it was like this practice of like deceiving and like, which for some people it very much is. But that was never my style of sales. It's not what made me successful. It's not what's made me, all of the money that I've been fortunate and blessed enough to be able to accumulate. And it's not what I suggest to people about their approach to sales. But that's how I got into sales, man. I like kind of stumbled into it, and it's been a blessing. It's
You
changed my
said a
life.
lot of interesting things. The number one takeaway is you said that once you got into it, it was 16 months straight where you were at the top of the leaderboard. And what I find it's very, very unique about that is most people by like month 3 to month 5, they actually learn too much and they forget to trust the process anymore. And they're like, well, I can do this shortcut now. And no,
Yeah,
this time I'm going to say this because I'm better at prejudging people. And so
yeah,
I always watch these people. I have to gauge them because you can take somebody on pure enthusiasm and excitement, and that transmutes itself, whether it's face to face or over the phone. Energy can motivate somebody because you're saying it with a raw authenticity. And so you
yeah,
don't have to have a lot of sales tactics. You just have to have a lot of belief because
yeah.
people, they believe in somebody who believes in their product. And so, but you didn't suffer that. Did ultimately it ever come where you started to kind of get ahead of your skis in your sales
I'm sure
knowledge?
it did. And the one thing you said there is, I think there's two things. There's like lazy, very skilled salespeople. There's hardworking hacks, and then there's hardworking, skilled people. Those are the elite, right? So in the beginning, I was a hardworking hack, and I just outworked everybody. Then I got a little skill, and I didn't allow that to suppress my hard work, right? So, like you said, prejudge people. I sold 10 cars a month more than everybody else because of this one reason. They would all stand out there and see Scott pull up, hat backwards, like casually dressed in like a 2 year old car, and they go, oh, he's upside down. He's not going to be able to trade it. I'd go greet Scott like he was my best friend, treat him like gold, and then an hour later ask him to buy, and those dudes are still standing out on the corner, and I'm walking across the lot with my deal
Yep.
jacket and my little $1,200 paycheck, and they're like, that guy bought? And I'm like, yeah, he bought. He's like, what about that Maxima he drove in? He has to be upside down. I was like, oh, that's his wife's car. He totaled his car 2 months ago. He had a $45,000 insurance check. He just paid cash for a Forerunner, and the company made 4 grand. And they're like, and so they judge some people, and he's got bad credit. He can't trade. He's got his kids here, whatever. And I'm sure I think it's human nature to do that, but I probably just went and talked to one of those people once and ended up selling him a car. And I was like, well, I'll just do that again. Right. And so I learned I think that was a big difference is a lot of people would prejudge clients, and I didn't, and I made more money and more sales than they did. And once I had that taste of knowing that some advice should not be taken, and I didn't take their advice. Hey, that's a waste of time. I was like, no, you standing here like playing rock, paper, scissors with seven of your buddies is a waste of time. I'm going to go work, dude. Like, worst case, if it doesn't work out, I spent an hour. I got to test drive a car. I got to practice my demo. I role
That
played.
exactly.
If it
So
if it
my
turns out to be a dead lead, I role played and I got a little bit better at closing or
Scarborough.
a little bit
Yep.
better at product. Yeah.
My first sales mentor is a gentleman named was Ray Rickard, and he always say is the process is stronger than the prospect. And so that was just something that like you just put everybody through the assembly line itself.
Yeah.
You treat everybody the same, and it's almost like putting a key into a lock. You put it in there, the pins that are supposed to fall will fall. And I remember being very, very young first, and I got very similar story. Like I applied to one college, it had just recently converted from being all women to now accepting men. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna go to a college, let me go to one that's like 80% women, 20% guys. Obviously, I got rejected, but I was destined really to follow in my father's footsteps, which was the same thing that his father had done, which is they roofed. This blue collar roof, the wife doesn't work, we roof, we're lower middle class, that's it. And I ended up getting a job at an alarm company. And then one day at this alarm company, which all we're doing is just pulling wires. Like I'm not sophisticated, but I'm pulling wires in a timeshare sales center one day. And I just asked one of these young kids that are driving these like really fancy cars. And I'm like, dude, what do you guys do? He's like, we do timeshare. I was like, well, what is this? And so literally that day started on a journey to it. And I was like, oh, I can do this because I don't want to do that anymore. That sucked.
Yeah.
I don't be in
Yeah.
hot roofs. I don't want insulation in my face. But going to prejudging, it was probably like month 2. The director of sales, Mr. Franklin, Brett Franklin himself, kind of similar to another guy in the industry. But anyways, he came to me, he was like, hey, listen, never had the DOS come to me and hand me a lead. He said, I want you to take this lead. I'll know you'll do the best with it. And it was a guy in coveralls, no undershirt, wearing coveralls. Everybody else was like, this is the worst lead in the world, give it to him. But for me, I was like, oh my God, the director of sales trusted me so much. Get through the whole pitch towards the end. And I'm so blind and naive that I didn't realize everybody else was hating on the lead. I thought I had been hand selected because I'm the bomb. The guy at the end literally lifts up the front little pocket there and pulls out stacks of cash and signs up right then and there. And so from that moment forward, once I understood the buzz, why everybody was laughing that I got that lead, I was like, I will never prejudge anybody ever. Because this guy with no shirt and coveralls on just whipped out thousands of dollars in cash, and I made a hefty check because I'm the only person here who didn't discount that guy because of the way he looked, and I got a check. And it literally, that one sale meant a lot to my future sales.
Yeah, it's funny when you said something that resonated with me that really sort of triggered me and took me back 20 years to the car business. When you said the process is stronger than the prospect. Now, mind you, too, in the mid to late 90s, the management style in a car business was very aggressive, right? So, like, one thing they would just pound on us was, don't you dare bring a client inside to get prices if you didn't demo the car, test drive the car, and do what's called a service walk, which is where you take them to the service department, you introduce them to the service advisors, you show them you got unlimited car washes, 24-hour scheduling, nice waiting room, all that stuff, right? And I just did it because I was told to do it. It's one of the benefits I got from the military. You don't ask questions. They say do push-ups, you do push-ups, right? They say get your head down, you get your head down. What happens if you don't? You get shot. All right. So I was really, really good at getting test drives. And then over time, I realized that, well, why was that effective? It's because after someone test drives a car, they start to imagine owning it. There's an emotional attachment. And what's the best time to give someone a price? At the peak of emotional attachment. So once I learned it, I was like, oh, it's not just about making us do more work. There's a science behind this. And that was the thing that I started to, over time, learn about sales, because we never really had formal training. I would just do something. If it was wrong, they'd tell me to stop and they'd tell me what to do differently. And I learned to follow instructions. And I made money. And I was like, hey, every time I do what Craig tells me to do, every time I say what he tells me to say, I get paid. And I'm like a little, performance animal in that sense. You tell me to do something and I get a treat, I'm going to keep doing whatever led to me getting a treat, right? And so it was funny that I learned that like sales in the beginning, I thought was this art of pressure and deception. And really over time, what I learned that it was the art of influence, right? And in order to influence people, you have, like I saw a stat today, Scott, 3% of people polled out of like 10 million people trust salespeople.
I can believe it. Jeez.
So the number one thing you can do to gain trust is to not act, talk, behave, or dress like a salesperson. Because
Yep.
what happens is the instant they look at you and you sound like, talk like, walk like a salesperson, they'll shut down and they'll go, I don't trust you. And then if they don't trust you, and even if you ask great questions, you may get either a false answer or they might not give you the total picture. So it was just crazy that over time, how my perception of sales was deceit and pressure. And what it became to be was the absence of pressure and influence, right? Which is that's how you get the actual, I forget who told me this, but the highest amount of control that you can have over another person is to give them the perception that they're in complete control.
Couldn't agree more. And
Well, how
I've
do you
heard
do
this.
that? You actually have to give them control, right? And that's much different than what I thought sales was when I started in the car business in the late 90s.
Yeah, it took me a while to really appreciate that sales is more listening than it is actually talking. And the power of silence is so deathly strong. And just like you were talking about your process, how you guys had to do all these things, we would have to put them in our car and drive them around town for like 60 minutes. And then we would do the most beautiful sales skilled things when we would get to these different stopping points, or we would go into a unit and we would show it to them and you wouldn't say anything, but you would just look. And you said so much just by looking and the way you presented your offer, and they couldn't buy the first offer. And so I really learned a lot from those initial years. I was very, very blessed that those are just pure fundamentals. Those fundamentals apply to whether you're a fronter, whether you're a closer, whether you're in car sales, whether you're in TV sales, any type of sales. These are just the common concepts. And so one of the things when we talk about real estate, and I'll kind of bring this forward now, I know you assist a lot of people with this really beautiful Brewer method novation exit. We'll come back to that in a second. But I wonder how much of your job is just trying to get people to baseline sales aptitude, communication aptitude, because I could be wrong, but I don't think you can apply this strategy on top of a poorly done sales process. So are you just looking at this industry and like, oh, I got to get you guys to here, then we can start having some fun in this cool strategy?
Yeah, it's funny. You said something earlier and about athletes, right? And when I look at a sales culture, a sales process, a salesperson, a sales manager, I see them very much like athletes and like performers, right? Where as a salesperson, if you work 50 hours a week, you may be with a prospect 15 of those 50 hours.
Yes.
So so let's think about an athlete. Like, what's your favorite sport, Scott? Don't say soccer because I don't know anything about soccer.
Good. Football.
Okay, football. So how long is a football game?
An hour.
Okay. So and if you're a quarterback, you play 25 minutes of that hour,
Max, yeah.
right? And so they play 25 minutes a week. How much do they practice leading up to that 25 minutes? 25 hours, 30 hours? It's
Yep.
almost a 10-to-1 ratio in most examples, right? So think about that in salesperson terms. If you have in our business, let's say 6 to 10 appointments a week, each of those appointments takes an hour and a half, right? So you're at 9 hours a week. You should be spending 4 to 5 times the amount of performance time that you have in practice. So what's practice look like? Listening to podcasts like this, going through a sales training, even if you've heard it 1,000 times. Like, think about this in baseball, right, or in football. If Tom Brady was like, no, I don't have to practice. I've thrown over 1,000 times. I have over like 3 Super Bowls. What do you mean? Why do you want me to go? No, he was the first guy at practice every single day and probably did more reps than anybody else, right? Baseball, the same thing. They get 4 at-bats a game. They take 200 swings. the morning before a game so that they're ready for those 12 to 15 pitches they may see in a game, right? Because and then here's the thing, if you don't practice, your practice is with the client, right? So as a salesperson, and we just literally changed this, where it used to be appointments and follow-up and calls was the priority, and we would fit training in between. We literally just flipped that upside down, and starting, I think it was March 1st or maybe it's April 1st, we now train and role play first, right? So we do every day, our plan is 15 minutes of teaching, 45 minutes of practice every single day, 4 days a week, and then 1 day a week we do 90 minutes of just teaching, right? So, and if you think about it in sales organizations, like our business, people lock up bad contracts. They got deals they can't dispo. And they're like, I got to get better at dispo. And I'm like, maybe. Or maybe if you were just better at sales when you bought the house, you would have bought it with more favorable terms and a deeper discount. Like, I think the best way to build a badass dispo department is to have a world-class acquisitions department.
Amen.
Makes sense? Right?
Yeah.
So the thing for me is, I think to your point, salespeople are athletes. They need to train like athletes and only perform 10 to 20% of the time. And, it's like I said it earlier when you talked about taking what everybody else thinks is a bad prospect. So I always ask this to someone, and I'll say, hey, Scott, when it comes to sales, like, what do you think about the value of role play and practices? What do you think they say?
The average person,
Well, no, not average. Only the people you and I would talk to, someone that actually gets it.
It's vital.
Yeah. Okay, so cool. So let me ask you a question. When you disqualify a lead or you choose not to go talk to them, let's imagine what would happen is if you went to that bad lead or you went to that crappy appointment or you talked to that person that you don't think's ready and you took them through an hour-long process and you tried to close them 5, 6, 7, 10 times and they kept no. And you said, well, what if this? And they said, I don't think so. And you said, well, how about this? And they go, well, maybe. And at the end, you still didn't get the sale. Does that feel a little bit like maybe role play? Actually, it's not role play. It's like a live scrimmage. And a live scrimmage is where you actually sharpen your skills, because what do teams do? They go from practice to live scrimmage to live game. So I say, listen, if you have the capacity, talk to every client that will allow you and try like hell to advance the sale. That's a form of role play. So if you go to 4 bad appointments a week, you still have time to do all your other stuff. You will be better after a month, after a quarter, after 6 months, after a year. No one will be able to catch you because you got 40 live scrimmages. They're not even role playing and practicing. You're doing both. Brother, you'll make 10 times the amount of money with the same amount of leads as other people. And it's too often overlooked because all the people want to do is rush to the appointment, rush to the phone call. You have to prepare. Like, athletes don't get up and run out onto the field. They stretch.
Yes.
Right? They warm up. They take practice swings. They live scrimmage, and then they perform. So if you really identify yourself, like Scott said, as an athlete, and you behave like an athlete, to me, that's the proper way to build sales. And then if people bolt on Novations, sub 2, fix and flip, multiple exit strategies, it's game over.
So I could literally piggyback off all this. We do Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 2 hours of training that I personally do in the morning. The exact analogy I used this morning with the team was Tom Brady. I said, listen, here's the playbook. This is our script. But no coach has ever been like, hey, here's the script. I'll meet you out on the field. So we're going to repeat, and repetition is the mother of learning. And it's going to get so dialed in that you guys can come up here and you should be able to host this training class and just helping them understand that we got to put in our reps before we go out there with live fire. And so for me, that's a big break-in on this. I was thinking about something you said. So you come from a TO track, I come from a TO track. Do you know what that means? Maybe it's different language, but
like
it's a turnover track. Yeah. You come from a TO track, I come from a TO track.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't go and in the sales process, which is a lot of these real estate guys, They get a lead. They can end the sales process on their own. They can walk out of the
Yes.
house. They don't have somebody they have to check in with. They can hang up the phone and say, hey, sorry, boss, that lead, she wasn't interested. And they can hang up. But I came from where you had to have a TO, but they wouldn't let us get a TO. Ray Rickert gave me 5 quarters. He was like, bring these 5 quarters to work all the time. I would have to sit with 5 quarters in my right hand, right pocket. And until I moved each quarter over that represented a no, I could not get a TO. I could
like
not
that.
hand that ball to the next person because he knew that hey, it takes a minimum 5 no's to get to a yes anyways, kid. So let's get through that part. But that type of mentality has really been so foundational. And so I'll share this little snippet with you, and then I want to go into your training. But when I first analyzed going into the real estate vertical, because I didn't know what wholesaling was, I didn't know what Novation was, I didn't know anything really. I had lent some money out to a buddy a couple of years until about 3.5, 4 years ago. But my very first thing that I did, Eric, before I said, yeah, I'll go into it, I started filling out forms on everybody's website. The quality of conversation that I got, if I even got a call back within a day, was such that I was literally like, oh, I'm going to come into this industry and I'm going to destroy people, because I couldn't believe how many people didn't have just sales fundamentals and principles, but yet they had a business per se. And you can't tell how much money people are actually making by just going to their website. But I was just damn shocked, man, at the lack of fundamentals in this particular industry.
It's one of the things about the real estate business is you can make $1 million a year and be an unskilled salesperson, because of the margins. I mean, you literally can get some sucker on the phone that's desperate and tie up their house and then sell it to someone who's desperate to buy and create $25,000 worth of spread. You do it twice a month and make $500,000 a year, right? It's the beauty of it. Yeah, I mean, but those people don't survive when the market changes and competition increases and interest rates increase. Skills are what separate people in tough times. And the TO dude, in my day, if you left someone leave the dealership without a TO, you would get like Jimmy Superfly Snuka drop kicked in the middle of the showroom. You'd get MF'd. They'd like pack your phone, the earpiece full of wheel bearing grease, and the next time you it's just that, dude, I'm telling you, the 90s car business was a movie. Like literally, it was hardcore. I had phones thrown at me. I got fired once a month. It was brutal. It was a legit boiler room environment, but it taught, like, we had to, if you went to the desk, and we were a busy dealership, we sold 300 cars a month, and you didn't have what we called a now, which is I would say, hey, Scott, seems like we did a good job selecting the right car for you. I sort of get the vibe that you and your wife feel like this would be a good fit with the cargo room that was important to you. And we talked a little bit about how that third row seat would give you guys room to expand your family, which you're planning on doing the next couple of years. If we're able to come up with an agreeable price and down payment and interest rate, is there any reason why you wouldn't want to take the car with you now? Right? And if they said yes, I go, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write now up here. I'm going to circle it real big. Matter of fact, I got a green marker I like to use. So when I go to the desk, the manager will know that it's go time and you're ready. All he's got to do is put that together. That gives me leverage to make sure that I can give you a really good deal and make this easy for you. And would you just go ahead and initial this up top for me so that they know you're serious? And so let's imagine you don't get it now. And there's like 4 dudes up there waiting for their trade to get appraised, waiting for them to get prices. You'd hand a worksheet, right? Like they take the worksheet and you go, hey, boss, can you get me numbers on that Camry? And he'd look and you go, you don't have it now? And they go, no, I don't have it now. And he goes, get the fuck out of here. You'll get numbers Tuesday, pussy. And literally they throw your work and you got to go back and explain to the customer, like, Scott, I can't get you a price. So we're really busy. I don't know if you see everything that's going on here, but I literally can't even get you a price.
That takeaway might reel them back in, though. All of a sudden you say,
it happened to me once, and I had to go back and explain myself, and then I would just do it. If I didn't get it now, I wouldn't even go to the desk. I'd just hang out up there for 2 minutes. I'd go back, and hey, Scott, like, man, I apologize, dude. I'm just not going to be able to get you a price. And what do you mean? And like, yeah, we're just so busy. They're only pricing out opportunities right now where people are willing to take the car with them. And I asked why. They said, well, the reality of this car even being here in an hour, when you might change your mind or come back is it wouldn't be fair to you. And people will be like, well, we'd buy it now as long as the down payment's not more than 5,000. Oh, and I'd realize like I missed something in the sales process, and I would start moving that towards the front and then even if you did TO and a manager TO'd, that was an insult. It was a closable deal and I couldn't close it. So I would resist TOs like it was the plague, right? Like people go, hey, go talk to Eric's customer. He needs it too. And I was like, no, no, no. Because what would happen is every time the manager went back to close my deal, my gross profit went
Yes.
like this and my pride went like this. And I was like, dude, the only two things that meant to me, I'm 23 at this point, my money and my pride mean everything to me. I was like Al Pacino in Scarface, right? He's like, two things I got in this world. And, and, and so I just learned not to TO, and I had to get better and better as a closer
Sure.
in order to be able to not have my gross profit be given away. Because the manager just wanted to make a deal, right? He's like, and he's got 6 other TOs to go do. So they go, you want to be at 400? How about 406? And we were at like 512. I'm like, dude, I could have gave up $100 a month. You didn't close them. You just gave all our profit away.
That's so
And I
true.
don't want to do that because I spent 2 hours with them.
Yeah.
Like, I can't make $100 flat on a car. Like I need to make money, and they like me. They want to do. They'll pay me. You just like tell me what the number is. So it's funny that the TO was a big deal in that business. We actually moved that over to our wholesale business, where
100%.
for before an agent can leave a house, they have to do a TO call. Then that's what prompted me to say we start bolting on all these QC things, and I was like, I wouldn't have to do that if we just got better at sales. And the only way we can get better at sales over time is to hire better, train more. And so what I'm hopeful for is I can free up my sales manager to not have to make 12 TO calls a day
Yep.
because we do them live. And then he was doing post calls where he would call the next day like a survey. And it was really,
Yep.
it was masked as a
Exit.
survey, but it
Yep.
was really a second TO.
Yep. Of
Right.
course.
And I was like, what if we didn't have to do that? We just got better at selling. And it was like, that would be awesome. Well, how do we get better at selling? It was train more. So we literally are 10Xing our training right now.
So let's talk about real quick the pivot into real estate. Was that a monumental leap? I mean, sounds like at some part of this journey, you're childless, you're making good money, you're a savage out there in the sales. It's consumed your life. What prompted you to make that real estate shift? And was it fear? Were you like, no, dude, I've saved up. I knew that this was what I was going to do. I had a pile of money. I'm ready to
A little
roll
bit
into
of both. I was making 200 grand a year, spending 205.
Yep,
I had
of
2
course.
Lexuses. I had 13 double-breasted $1,500 suits. I had everything and had nothing at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And I got burned out. I got a girl pregnant, and I was working 85 hours a week, drinking 45 hours a week, gigoloing 25 hours a week, right? And
Yep.
I was like, hey, man, something's got to give. There's no way I can be a good dad and continue to live this lifestyle. And once again, I turned to my father. My father gave me sage advice. He's like, man, you got to get away from that. Like the drinking companies, you run hard. And you probably saw this in timeshare, right? Like we would grind for 12 hours a day and go drink till 4 a.m. That was what you did. And those were my people. Those are my guys. Those are my brothers. And he's like, you got to get out of there or this other stuff will never change. So
Yep.
I did have a little bit of money saved up, not much. And I took 6 weeks off, did some soul searching. My dad's like, hey, man, I don't think you're a car guy. I think you're a sales guy. Go find something you can sell that doesn't require 80 hours a week. And I had sold cars to appraisers, real estate agents, right? And I'd look at their credit app and they're making 200 grand a year and they're in with me at Tuesday at noon. And I'm like, hey, do you have anywhere to be? It's going to take about an hour to get the paperwork. Like, no, I don't have any appointments today. I'm off. I'm like, what? You're off today and Sunday and Thursday and you make 200 grand a year? So I started as basically a cold caller at a refi house in the mortgage business. I made 34 grand my first 5 weeks there, working 5-hour days, smacking people for 6 grand on a $200,000 loan. And I was like, I'm in. 6 months after doing that, my old mentor and the owner of the car dealership that taught me everything I know sold the dealership, got into real estate, and invited me to start a flipping business with him. And that's how I got into real estate. So I was scared out of my mind, but this dude is literally King Kong. Like if he says we're gonna go do it, I'm running right behind him, and I have no fear. We did 77 deals our first year in the real estate business, 200 deals the next year, and we did 200 deals for a decade, and then we've had incremental growth year over year. I bought him out 5.5 years ago, and him and I to this day are still really really close friends. And
I love it.
yeah, he taught me everything, dude. I'll never forget. I was talking about this with him yesterday. I had a deal. It was on a. This is back when. Do you remember the Chrysler or Plymouth Prowler?
Yes.
Right. And when it first came out, there was like a year waiting list,
Yeah.
and he would go buy these at an auction and bring them back. We would pay like sticker price for them at auction, and we would bring them back and sell them for 10, 15 grand over. And I had a lead on that, and they offered me like 2 grand less than asking price. I knew we were making like 7 grand. I'm like, Craig, I got a deal, dude. They'll do the deal right now. Sign up. 745 a month, $1,800 down, this number. And he's like, no. Huh? We're making 7 grand. He's like, I don't give a shit. Like, why are you giving up 3 grand? And he's like, here's what you tell him. And he goes back and he goes, tell him that you're the top salesperson. Show him you have been for 14 months straight. And let him know one of the reasons you sell more cars than everybody else is because you pre-negotiate all of your deals. So that by the time you get a price for your clients, you've already negotiated the best deal, because most people that come into a car dealership hate the back and forth. I went back, repeated it word for word. They're like, okay, we'll take it. And I was like, huh? And I made 10 grand on a car, right? And so that guy literally, like when I first started, he TO'd every one of my deals, and I would stand over his shoulder, right? Actually, it's a cool idea. I'm going to get a portrait made, like a painting of him sitting at a car desk and me standing here. I'm going to have that made. You have my word. I'm going to do it, because he taught me everything, and it was me standing behind him, looking over at the notes he was writing on the page, and he'd circle it, he'd cross it out, he'd hand it to them to initial. By the time he was done, the piece of paper, there was no room left on it. And that was a strategy, right? He's like, well, when there's no room left on the paper, they feel like there's no room. There's no room. I'm out of paper, Scott. There's nowhere else to go. And I'd do it, and then closer, and then it was like I'd stand here, then I'd look over his shoulder, and then I closed him yesterday. I wanted to gamble on March Madness, and he was like, no. And I was like, and he's like, don't pressure me. And we went back and forth via text 5 or 6 times, and like finally he was like, God damn it, dude, you just closed me. And it was like this, and then he texted me this morning. He's like, all joking aside, I don't want to gamble on March Madness. He spun out. He backed out of the deal this morning. But had that been a real deal, I would have had him papered last night, and he wouldn't have been able to squirrel out on me. But it's amazing how that stuff happens. And
but
man,
it's the concept too, man.
mentor. You had a mentor. Like, if you're in sales and you're listening to this, find somebody that's doing what you want to do. They're driving what you want to drive. They live in the house you want to live in. They have the kids and the family that you want. And just do what they're doing, right? Sales it's probably one of the oldest professions, if not the oldest in the world. There's no secrets, right? There's just only people that learn and they implement, or people that just hack and they don't, and they just keep doing the same stuff. They make $61,000 a year instead of making $200,000 or $400,000 or $1 million a year, and they live this life of like I call it excellent mediocrity. It's like they've become really good at being average. Like there's like excellence, they're right below that, but they're at the top level of average. And I mean, I don't know about you, but that's what scares me, is average.
This literally, we could go forever. I want to give an opportunity to really give a shine to the impact that you made to the REI space. Before we go there though, I want to just talk about the fundamentals that you talked about, him being over your shoulders there, and then him taking over on those kind of TOs in the beginning. what that does to consumers, and we found our way to be able to do it over the phone too, but it's like moving to their side of the table, because at most face-to-face you're sitting opposing from them and you're going through the consultation, but all of a sudden you need help and you need to talk to that back office, and now there's this authority and you need to have underwriting review the deal. You get to both on the phones, you get to paint that picture, but in face-to-face you get to move to their side of the table. And there's something so powerful when you're now their ally. You're on their side of the table. You're now working with them. I bet we can get him, and let me go to the back office. And you know what? Sometimes in the back office for our REI deals, they're more numbers based. They don't really know. Do you mind if I share with them what you said with your dog, problems that she's going through? And then us being able to have a common enemy, which is the back office, and we're going to get this deal. Just give me your hand. I'm going to hold it. We're going to walk across the finish line together. Trust me, blah, blah, blah. So, dude, I love hearing those types of stories, because a lot of people who are new to the REI space, they don't understand why some of these concepts that we have come from, candidly. And it really has to do with that face-to-face training that we were able to bring over the phone or face-to-face in the REI space.
100%, man. I love it.
Yeah. Cool, man. So tell me, the Brewer method. Was there a method before, and then you were like, hey, no, we're doing it this way?
Yeah, so what happened was I started this business in 2006. In 2008, the world fell apart. And in 2006, the easiest thing to do in the world was to get a mortgage. In 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12, one of the hardest things in the world to do was to get a mortgage. So in 2006, 2007, what fueled a lot of the economic crisis that unfolded was irresponsible lending. So like literally you could be a 540 credit score, not be able to document your income, be on your job for 4 months, and you could get a no doc stated income loan. So there was all these non-conforming subprime loans, right? It's literally what fueled the recession. So in 2008, 2009, there was a very severe response to that. They got rid of all non-conforming loans. All these places went out of business, and everybody that was getting a mortgage in that time had to use FHA financing unless they had like 40% down and a 900 credit score. So as a flipper, I flipped houses, right? I had these homes I owed for 3 weeks. I renovated it. I got it on the market, and I'm getting these FHA offers, and I can't sell it to them because of deed seasoning. So I'm doing 200 deals a year. I'm freaking out, right? This takes my cash conversion cycle from 50 days to like 150 days. And when you got 100 properties in your inventory at 100 grand a piece, I got 15 million on the street. And at that time, like values were dropping every 30 days, right? So I started pounding my head against the wall. And I say this a lot, and it always makes me laugh. For the first time and probably the last time ever, the US government did something that positively impacted my life. And they introduced an FHA flip waiver around 2008 that got rid of deed seasoning. You could buy a house and sell it the next day to an FHA buyer. You needed 2 appraisals and a safety inspection. So I was business as usual. That flip waiver expired in 2010. And over those 2 years, I knew it was going to expire. I was just pressing my attorney to help me figure out a way to circumvent FHA seasoning, and he introduced me to Novations. And Novations are real popular, like in commercial construction, government contracts, but no one ever used a wholesale strategy in real estate to do it. And I stumbled on it. I understood the legal aspect, and I was like, man, this would help me circumvent FHA deed seasoning. And I just started making offers to sellers and requiring access and explaining it to them. And the first Novation deal I got was a public auction that I was at, where the attorney, the auctioneer, and the seller were all there. All the people bid. They said, no, we're not going to sell it. There's a reserve. I approached them. I pitched the Novation. They said yes. 37 days later, I sold it, made 27 grand, and I was off to the races. So basically what it is it's a way to sell your deals to a retail buyer without ever taking title. So, in this business, there's wholesalers who do high volume, low margin with no money. Then there's flippers who generally do low volume, high margin. It requires a ton of cash. This combines the two, and it's wholesale risk, which is minimal to zero, and retail profit, which is, in our experience, I've been teaching now for 3 years. I've taught over 500 real estate investors across the country. They literally make double the profit on Novations than they do their wholesale business, and their volume goes up by about 25 to 40%.
Yeah, I've been able to witness your guys' performance a little bit more intimately than other people. I have another business relationship with you from a marketing company, but what I'm able to see is you guys have a ridiculously high spread, like an ROI, abnormal for also in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. No disrespect.
No, it's
Like
what it is.
what I tell people is like, yo, he's got tier one revenue deal size coming from a tier two, tier three tertiary markets. Like
Yeah.
it blew my mind initially when I would hear your guys' ROI numbers and some of your returns because it's like, how you doing that? Where and nowhere wants to live PA. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
So
man.
for people who are your students though, or not even your students, excuse me, what do you think the people who are trying to novate, what's the number, and I know this is so cliche, but what's the biggest mistake that they're making? People who are failing at the novation process.
Disqualifying people with minimal to little motivation, visible signs of motivation that are asking close to retail.
Okay. So they're not doing a good enough discovery to get to the real
No,
pain,
I
or
think
you
they're doing a good job of discovery, but literally, like, you got to be motivated. I would even say distressed to sell your house for 75% of ARV minus reno minus fee. So you do a discovery and there's no distress, right? On a novation on a house that has a current condition retail value, which that means if I took the deal the way it sits, I didn't lift a finger and I put it in the MLS, what would a buyer pay for it?
Yep.
Let's say it's 400,000 and they'll sell it to you for 90% of that. That's a novation deal that you can make 30 grand on. But it's not a
Yep.
wholesale deal that you would even probably attend the appointment or make an offer. So they're too ingrained in the wholesale policy of disqualifying and discovery and
That's it.
motivation and equity, and they disqualify people that will leave 10%, 15% in the deal because they can't retail it or they don't want to close on it. And a novation allows them to not close on it and still wholesale it without ever paying for it.
And so for people that are in various industries out there, they're in the sales game. Again, we're talking about a way to kind of trade paper in the real estate world. We have typically distressed sellers, and we find people who are interested in those properties. We connect them and take an arbitrage fee, if you will, in the middle. I can tell you my own closer staff in Orlando, where we struggled with novations, is we were just so, in the beginning, we were so addicted to the wholesale drug, that quick flip, that 10, that
Yeah.
15, 17. And the problem that started to happen is big deals get small, small deals go away. And so what I love about the novations is it added a lot more stability to us. And so we still go wholesale first, as I think you should, because we want to anchor that person on that offer. And so it reminds me of my TO days. It's because that first offer is way priced too high. The back office and now having this, equity protection program that
Yeah.
we were talking about in the meeting this morning. I'm not even sure if your property and kind of doing that soft takeaway and that
Yep.
roll into it. It allowed us to get off of the drug of that because we were doing exactly what you said. Is we would say we were actually selling the person on needing to move out fast. And
And they
so
don't want to.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
not,
but
not
we thought we
everybody.
had
Yeah.
to.
So that's the second mistake people make is they don't anchor with a wholesale offer and they go, oh, they're
Mm,
not motivated. The house is nice. Hey, I could list it for you, Scott. And yeah. So that's bad. I do have a hard stop. I actually have a sales
yep.
training at 12 o'clock. We have a town hall, but I would tell you for people that are listening, a great way to summarize novations is it's a wholesale style strategy, which means you don't close on it, doesn't require cash, and you don't have to renovate it. Generally on properties in wholesale condition, which means they're not all clapped out, the roof's not collapsing, it'll pass a safety inspection and an FHA VA appraisal, and you're selling to retail buyers.
I love it. I understand. How do people learn more? And I'm telling everybody out there, if you're listening, if you're in the REI space, you need to have this as an exit strategy. It is going to help you monetize a lot more of your leads and give your guys more confidence on the phone. So how do they find Eric Brewer for the Brewer method and get
Yep.
involved with this?
Two ways. Best ways. I literally I do this stuff. I put out 2 or 3 pieces of social media content every day about sales and life and leadership and novations. You can follow me on Instagram. It's Eric_Brewer_invest. Or you can go directly to my website. It's brewermethod.com.
Great. So they're going to turn no's into novations.
That's the deal.
I love that. And then
Yeah.
also, dude, just reach out to me, ping me, send me a photo when you get that painting made, you and your original TO back there, dude. I'd love to see it. I appreciate your time. You're one of the realest in the game. You obviously have decades worth of sales experience. And if somebody wants to shortcut that learning curve and find somebody that they can mentor under, reach out to Eric Brewer. Scale your exit services in your REI space with the Brewer method. I appreciate your time again, brother.
See you, bro.